Hello, everybody. Welcome to What a First-Time GC Needs to Know About Privacy. I'm Matt. I'm the head of community at Lawtrades. If you don't know Lawtrades, we are effectively, we facilitate the legal infrastructure of in-house departments. We help law departments with our fantastic, awesome talent, our attorneys, our paralegals, legal operations professionals, and contract managers do more with less. Now, thank you everyone for being here and being a part of our community. That means a lot to me as our head of community. And we have a lot of great events. This event I've been looking forward to forever because privacy is such a huge issue, privacy of law especially. So I'm talking a bit too much. I'm going to lead it over to Ben Isaacson. Ben is a fractional privacy officer, a principal at In-House Privacy Inc. He's also a Lawtrader, which is awesome. Ben, I'm passing it over to you.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. As Matt mentioned, I'm Ben Isaacson. I've been in the privacy space for almost 26 years now, and I've worked with a lot of startups, with a lot of general counsels, and so this topic is incredibly important and interesting to me. And I'm so glad that we've got this amazing panel that we're going to hear from today. So I'm going to introduce our two panelists. First is Peter Pernod-Day, who is the Global Chief Privacy Officer and Deputy General Counsel at the Shein Group, not Shein, as I was calling it for like the last couple of years. And he's got a great privacy tech background. I'll let him introduce himself in a second, but it includes working at MarTech company Mixpanel and other interesting companies in the privacy and intersection of privacy and data. And then we have Jordan Mazur, who is with Lively, which is one of the newer players in the health tech HSA space. Also has a great privacy and legal background, including working at Rakuten, which is one of the largest global affiliates. So I'm going to turn it over to each panelist. Peter, maybe we'll start with you. Can I give a brief thought process on what brought you here, and same with Jordan, and then we can just dive into the questions.
Oh, thanks, Ben, and thanks for the nice introduction. So as Ben mentioned, I'm the Deputy General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer for Shein. Shein is a global multi-channel e-commerce platform. We sell into 150 countries and offer over 600,000 distinct products. Very excited to speak with the community today. I'm passionate about data protection and privacy law, and I think one of the best ways to protect personal data is to evangelize its benefits to legal stakeholders like yourselves. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you all today.
Jordan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jordan Mazur. It's great to be here. It's great to be sharing this panel with a fellow IU law grad. It's the only way that I agreed to do this. And I think that probably in the last 10 years, you've seen more panels like this and more topics and more webinars and more white papers and everything on this topic than ever. And I still don't think it's enough. So anytime anybody says, let's talk about this, let's put our heads together, let's see what we can learn from each other's experience, I think that it's a great opportunity, and I'm happy to be a part of this one.
Great. So let's dive in. We haven't, I think that as a panel suggested, we're talking about general counsels, but certainly that would include deputy general counsels and any head of legal for a company. What do you think the number one thing that a head of legal should be thinking about when it comes to privacy, when they don't have a privacy attorney telling them what to do?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with that one. I think that the worst place that you can possibly be in is a lack of knowledge. And that means understanding the business, but it also means understanding at least something about privacy and data protection, even if in every interview that you sat in for the job and on your first day, everyone tells you like, oh, we don't have any of that kind of data. We're not that kind of company. Don't worry about it, whatever. You got to make sure that you know what you're dealing with, because it's the only way to attack a problem, of course, is to understand what the problem is in the first place. What is your role? What are you doing? Are you going to be hiring a privacy lawyer immediately? Are you never going to hire a privacy lawyer? Are you handling product? Are you handling marketing? In all of these cases, you have to establish yourself as someone that people are going to come to. Whatever your skill set is, I doubt that you are the expert in every single area of the company and on every single team. So you're going to be relying on people coming to you, wanting to come and talk to you. And if you don't have that context that I talked about at the top, if you don't know what you're talking about, the instinct is going to be to protect the company. Don't do that. No, you can't do that. We can't do that. We can't worry about that. You cannot put yourself in that position. You have to be able to say, if you're saying don't do that, here's why. I understand that our business needs this. Let's figure out some other way. So in a couple of books, or whether it means watching some webinars or whatever else, you have to have that baseline level of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think understanding your business and your business's objectives with information is one of the two places where I would always start and always recommend that a new GC start is, what do we want to do with data? How do we monetize data? How do we collect data? And you'd be surprised that there are multiple business lines that you might not think about that are in the data business. So it's a really great place to start, as Jordan recommended. I also think it's important to start with an analytical framework of privacy. And to me, that's realizing that privacy laws as they exist are largely mechanistic. That means that they allow you to use data provided that you meet certain criteria, jump through certain hoops, and follow certain steps. And I think if you approach privacy law with that framework, that sort of mechanistic framework, you'll be much more successful in drafting a privacy strategy that will meet your business needs. And I think that's really what Jordan was driving at, which is if you're in the business of no, you'll quickly be pushed aside or ignored when it comes to these fast-moving, data analysis practices and data enrichment practices, and really monetization at the end of the day.
For smaller businesses or even just smaller legal teams, like a solo GC or a very lean legal team, does your answer change when you're talking to those kind of audiences?
I think that in that circumstance, and a lean team often means a small overall company team, right? And it means that you can't rely on, oh, well, I'm the only one on legal, but I have 15 privacy engineers. No, you don't have any. You have 2 engineers that know something about privacy, right? And so you cannot wait to take action. You have to get involved and be an active participant in all of these different things and find your way to understanding what is going on and how you can help. Establishing the ways to do that, the pathways to escalating issues, to understanding, to remediating, all of that, it has to start with your proactivity, especially in that circumstance where you're the only one there. And there are so many ways, in my opinion, there's so many shortcuts for a small team, but one that I want to touch on, and I saw that we had a question in the chat that kind of leads into this. And the question was, how do we monitor the evolving landscape of federal, state, local, and then that's just in the United States, because there's also every other country in the world and municipality and every other darn thing in the privacy space. And then also we're seeing a lot of security regulation happening, right? And then, of course, here in the United States, we're also talking about industry specific, right? In all of those circumstances, and I'm talking mostly here to first-time GCs, you would be surprised, perhaps, at how much you can benefit from outside counsel and consultants and other folks that want your business. There are so many times where, for a specific issue or just for catching up on the state of play, where it's been a lawyer that is like, oh, congrats on that new job. They give you the little LinkedIn thumbs up. Let us know if you ever need anything. And you, in the course of getting into the job, you ping that person and go, hey, we're not ready to bring on full-on privacy counsel as an outside counsel yet. But, we're just trying to get our feet wet or whatever. We're trying to get the lay of the land. You get, look, all the outside lawyers, if you happen to be on this call, just plug your ears for a second. You get so much advice. It's not free. It's a down payment for your business later, perhaps, right? But you get so much access to information and knowledge by just working that network a little bit, which I personally find exhausting, but you have to do it. And by participating in these free or related to associations that you may be a part of, events and the papers and everything like that, signing up for the mailing lists on some of these trade organizations that specifically deal with privacy and security, you get a lot. I remember a couple of years ago when CCPA was first becoming a thing, and it was, oh, is it going to even pass? And what are they doing with the ballot initiative and everything? It's It's about 1,000 years ago in privacy regulation. Every single trade organization and association membership, all of those things, sent out 1,000 emails about it. All you had to do was be signed up for one of them to be able to have some sense of what was going on. And you can't read all of them anyway, so I don't necessarily recommend signing up for all of them. But getting involved in those ways, just taking that step, it doesn't mean that you have to get into the dark side and become a full-on privacy lawyer, but it does mean putting yourself in a position to receive that information, whether it be from those outside lawyers that want your business, whether it be from these organizations. In all of those cases, they are all blasting out emails. They are all putting on a webinar every time that something changes in California or Vermont or anywhere else. And you sign up for them. Oh, I couldn't do that one, but I listened to the recording. Oh, I couldn't do that one, but I got the download. I got the paper afterwards. Oh, I actually listened to that one, and they said exactly what I was thinking, so I know I don't need to listen to 5 more. You get that sense of things very, very quickly if you just engage with the privacy segment a little bit.
That's great. Thank you, Jordan. So one of the biggest challenges I think we've faced in the global privacy world is the European laws that have come into effect in the last 4 years, or even longer than that, going back to many of the data protection directives around different countries, the e-privacy directive with cookies, and then the general data protection regulation, GDPR, and then now even with the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act coming, there's just so much coming out of Europe, as well as other countries like Brazil and Japan and many other places. How do you focus on your domestic or regional business versus Europe and other markets? And do you try and take a global approach to your privacy operations, or do you splinter them based on the regions and requirements? Maybe Peter, you'd like to start.
Yeah, I think it's really could be the defining question for privacy practitioners over the next 5 years, and it's a really important question. As Jordan and I both sort of advocated at the outset, it comes down to your business objectives, and you have to understand your product and how your products function. I think if you have a product that's singular and that you can sell in basically the same format across jurisdictions, and you're operating in Europe, it's really a great idea to try to build your privacy program around the GDPR in the first instance, or another similar, very restrictive set of criteria. I think if you are selling multiple products and they're very different, and you're selling in multiple jurisdictions, that can become much more challenging. And with the rise of, let's say, the Chinese personal information protection law, or the PIPL, you have a variety of jurisdictions that are exploring requirements around data residency and data localization. And so I think that the answer is really going to depend on how you assess your business and your business's objectives. 5 years ago, I would have told you, pick the GDPR, pick the European model, apply it universally, and you're probably good in 99% of the cases. I think that's starting to change. And so particularly if you have multiple product lines, you are going to have to explore, in my opinion, a regional privacy compliance strategy.
I just want to note for the record that it took 16 minutes for one of the lawyers on this call to say the answer is it depends, which is the longest that you could have possibly expected it to take. I think
because I use more solutions oriented in our legal education.
I think it, for us at our stage, and we're a little bit smaller company, we're not able to take, for instance, a state-by-state approach, right? And I think a state-by-state approach is going to be really hard to implement. So for us, and when you're early on, it's easy to do this. You say, well, we're going to take the most generous possible approach based on the fact that we're only in the United States, and so it's fairly easy to harmonize these requirements and aim to offer the same product and service. It also makes it way easier on the servicing side. But I think that's basically impossible if you're global, and it's basically impossible if you have distinct lines of business. And we continue to see possible conflicts in the various laws. So I think I agree with it depends, and I think that it is unfortunately an area that I don't think is going to get easier anytime soon, because one of the magical things about legislators is that they not only want to put their name on a bill, but they want to show why it's different and better than what they copied and pasted from some other jurisdiction. And so you're going to end up in a situation where everything is slightly different. and it will not always be possible to harm them.
Great. There are so many difficult issues in privacy now. And I'm going to leave out from that statement information security and data breaches as a whole separate category of difficulty to manage. So when you think about like the landscape of difficult privacy issues, even things like managing data subject access or deletion requests and doing it effectively in a short period of time, or other kind of more, tricky issues with ad tech and the complexity of ad tech and where it's going from cookies to cookieless, or like there's so many issues now. What do you think is like one of the hardest issues that you're facing in privacy today? And maybe, in your past, if you have any experience or stories you'd like to share about some of those challenges.
So I'll start off. I think that one of the emerging key challenges, and I think this stems from a leak a couple days ago of a Facebook internal memo that I actually thought was pretty remarkable in itself, is data mapping and data governance. And how can you say that you comply with certain legal requirements when it's very, very difficult to systematically locate and keep tabs on your information? And I think that challenge, the challenge of consistently meeting legal obligations and legal commitments that you've made either in privacy notices or in other contracts, is going to become very, very important and very, very difficult. And why is it difficult? I think you've seen over the last 20 years an explosion in data-driven businesses. And for most of that time, it was very okay to collect lots of data, to not really keep close tabs on where it went. And I think we're starting to see a significant shift where regulators, particularly in the European Union, but also in the United States, want to have much more visibility and expect much more visibility into how your data is used internally. And that's going to be a very significant challenge for most businesses, which have built systems not really equipped to answer those questions. So to me, I think that's a major challenge. And it's something that I wrestle with all the time, having worked on data maps, it seems endlessly for the last 4 or 5 years. It's very, very difficult to put together a dynamic data map that isn't obsolete the minute you publish it. And so I think those are areas I would focus on early on as a new GC.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple questions that Peter's answer kind of ties right into right here in the chat. And one is, for a very lean legal team, what tasks would you triage or prioritize for a brand new privacy program, assuming you're aiming for something like US and CCPA compliance? And another is, do you have cost-effective ways to do data mapping? Well, the answer to the first one is I would prioritize data mapping. And the answer to the second is I don't know about the cost, because it's going to take a lot of time. But if you don't have one of those tools, and we're going to talk a little bit about tools later, I saw a question about that too. If you don't have one of those tools and you don't have a program in place and you have a team of people that are more or less looking to do the right thing, but they don't have any idea what you think the right thing is, it might not cost you a lot of dollars out of pocket to a vendor, but it's going to cost you a lot of time. You're going to spend a lot of time. The war story, such that it is for me, is the first time that I tried to do data privacy, data mapping at a company. We had something like 600 people, and I talked to 115 of them, so about 1 in every 5 people. Now, that was a not brand new tech stack, and it was a company that had, kind of a footprint already established with no privacy program to speak of, which meant got to go talk to engineers on every single team. Why did you do this? What did you even do in the first place? And the first part of every one of those conversations was explaining to them why the heck you're even talking to them, which I think is a hard thing to do, other than like privacy law, because nobody wants to hear that, and nobody wants you to cite the regulation to them. So this is just between us, so I'm not going to tell anybody that's not on here. The way that I always approach that conversation is, at the end of the day, I need to be able to answer 3 questions to my satisfaction, which are, where are we getting the data? Should be relatively simple. Where are we sending the data? Should be relatively simple. And then another question that might sound relatively simple at first, which is, all right, in between, what are we doing with the data? If you can just answer me those 3 questions, we'll be out of here. And lots of times people, especially naive people that don't realize that lawyers are jerks, think, oh, this is going to be a 10-minute meeting. I'm going to tell them where we're getting the data, and I'm going to tell them. And then you go from there. And you hear what people have to say, especially once they start going, oh, you're not also interested in these automatic data feeds that we're putting together, are you? Oh, you are? All right. And then they settle in because they realize you're going to talk to them for the next 2 hours. And you spend the time doing that. And Peter's right. The problem with that, and honestly, the problem with a lot of the tools, is it's obsolete the moment that you finish, especially if you're talking to 108 people, right? Well, that's where those individual conversations come in handy, because what you're doing is not just getting the information. You're hopefully developing eyes and ears around the organization. You're developing your accolades. You're proselytizing why this is important to us. And it doesn't take too many times of you saying, hey, did you know that the other engineering team also has 16 copies of this data, which means that we have this data in 19 different systems and we're all using it for the same 2 things? It doesn't take too long to go talk to finance and go, you know, we're paying for 3 tools that are doing the exact same thing with this data, before they go, can you please keep doing that project? And it doesn't take too long from engineering to go, oh, the lawyer said actually we can do this. We just have to do X and Y. Maybe we should ask them if we can do this other stuff. You have to show yourself to be that partner. So we talked about at the beginning. But by doing it manually, yes, it takes more time. But if you're a leanly staffed team, and if you're not out there buying X or Y tools, which we'll talk about in a minute, the benefit of it is that you're creating a knowledge base around the organization. You're putting yourself in a position where you're not the only person thinking about this. Don't mishear me. Not every engineer, and certainly not every marketer, is going to say, now I'm a privacy champion. But some will. And you will put yourself in a position that the next time you have to go in front of the whole company and go, we have a problem here, you're going to see some heads nodding. It's not going to be 100% people going, what the hell is that guy rambling about again?
Thank you. That's great. And I'm going to pick up on, you had said this a little bit in the beginning, around a couple of questions we just got around data mapping and even, how do you do operational privacy? The whole industry of privacy tech has exploded. And if anybody was at the IAPP event, there's a whole exhibit floor now full of privacy tech solutions. I'm increasingly being asked by clients, can you help us navigate all of these solutions? Data mapping being kind of one of those where, you have, major corporations like Big ID that are now valued at $5 billion in market cap, that, do every, you just wave a magic wand at your data stream and they will just tell you everywhere your data is, right? So I think there's a lot of those kind of big enterprise solutions, and then you go down to like the very, very small a la carte. We only do data subject requests and we help you automate the forms and the back end and whatever. And so, for somebody coming into this, especially a GC that doesn't have that kind of depth of privacy expertise, how do you look at the privacy tech landscape? And do you look at it like, okay, we just have this data mapping thing we got to figure out, so we're going to go with this a la carte, like one-off approach? Or do you look at like the OneTrust of the world that are valued at $10 billion now in market cap, and they can do anything and everything under the sun, that's related to privacy and compliance for you? How do you approach that? And, maybe if you have any stories about your diligence efforts and looking at these tools or even onboarding them, that would be fantastic. So maybe, Peter, you want to kick this topic off?
Yeah, I think this applies to software in general, but particularly to what I've come to call the privacy industrial complex, is software is at the end of the day a tool. And it's a tool that's designed to do a specific thing. And so I think you really have to start with, what do you want to accomplish with this tool? And will the tools under selection accomplish what you want it to? And they all do some variation of parts of this, or some do DSARs better, some do data mapping better. And I think it's really a question that you have to begin with, what do you want to get out of the tool? I also think another sort of rule of thumb that I adopt is understanding these solutions' limitations. There's obviously the sales pitch that this will revolutionize your privacy program, that you'll be able to comply with this or that legal framework, that you'll be able to automate and speed up all of these things. Those are great, and I have every confidence that those providers are being truthful and candid. I think, though, that at their highest and best use, these tools are organizational enhancers. They allow you to organize yourself and organize your program, but they do not replace the shoe leather that Jordan was talking about. And they require a very high level of commitment, both from you, maybe from a legal ops specialist, maybe from IT or other technical partners, to bring them up to their full potential. And so I do think, and would caution new GCs, that if they think that a solution or a software tool will give them a privacy program in a box, I've yet to see a solution that can really do that right out of the box. So I would, prepare to put in some shoe leather in whatever solution that you ultimately end up selecting.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking about is the demos are great. And I don't think they replace the work. I don't think I haven't seen one that replaces a good outside lawyer for the legal questions. I haven't seen one that replaces a good privacy program manager that is, really, really focused. And that doesn't mean that person doesn't have to be a lawyer. They don't even have to have necessarily done it for X number of years beforehand. But someone that's paying close attention, that those tend to be more valuable. I've seen those tools that we're talking about, and there's some that we've named, and there's many, many more that we haven't named. I've seen them offer a free trial all the way up to 6 and maybe even 7-figure contracts, depending on the size of the organization, what you want them to do. That gives me a lot of heartburn, but the consistent theme from the free trial all the way up to the really, really expensive ones is I never left any of them going, wow, they over-delivered. Wow, they really took care of all the problems that we knew we had, and then 3 problems we didn't know we had. They do some of what they're going to tell you that they do, and a lot of it is more manual than you wish. And I really hope that I'm sitting here at some point, sometime soon, saying that's not true anymore. But I've been waiting for that for a while, and I still think it's true.
I think that last point is super important for everybody to take away, is that, in order for these privacy tech solutions to work in your company, somebody needs to really own it and be dedicated to it and understand the scope of hours that they're going to put in, on a daily or weekly basis to maintain that use case. And more importantly, if the belief is that you're going to onboard, like, for example, OneTrust, you're going to get the whole company to just onboard on the OneTrust, and they're all going to fill it out without any need for assistance or consulting, from that product, that OneTrust owner. I've never seen that happen yet to date. That owner pushes and pushes and pushes and has to keep people engaged in the platform. And that's a really hard, role to play in the company. It's not, and it's typically not going to be the general counsel, privacy counsel that typically does that. That I think, as Jordan mentioned, a privacy manager or some dedicated program or product manager should be on it. So I'm mindful we have a lot of great questions, but I also have a few others. But this one you touched on, I think, earlier, or both of you maybe touched on, but I just want to kind of get it more tactical. What resources and trainings or white papers or email newsletters, how do you stay up to date specifically on a day-to-day basis? Do you attend conferences? Like, are there any conferences worth attending? Just give us some tactical feedback on how a GC can be on top of everything going on in the world of privacy. Maybe Peter, you want to kick off?
Yeah, so I think that the IAPP plays a really vital role in the privacy space. I think they do have some value. I have become less enamored with their conferences over time. I think that they are less valuable than they used to be. So I personally do not attend those, but some people find those conferences to be quite valuable. It really depends on where you're at in your privacy journey. But the IAPP's website does have a terrific news feed, and they have some really talented people who contribute research, news articles, and content on that website, which I think is an absolutely great place to go. In fact, I was just using it the other day and found something that I was looking for very quickly and was able to share with our senior leadership. So I think it's a great resource. The other resource that I strongly recommend is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become a great repository of sort of cutting edge and developing news, particularly in the privacy space. There are a number of sort of privacy influencers who publish documents, who have links to the latest guidance that's coming out of the European Union. They have case law sometimes, and that's just been invaluable for me to try to see where things are headed and to get news and guidance and links to documents that I can then digest and put into practice. And the last thing that I would recommend in terms of sort of a tactical approach to getting up to speed is really investing and finding a competent outside counsel, someone who can partner with you, who can bring you along, who has been there, done that, seen this, and even just someone to bounce ideas off of. That partnership, I think, will be more valuable than OneTrust, IAPP, and LinkedIn combined. So finishing with the best, but really find a good outside lawyer who you can work with.
Yeah, I'm going to co-sign basically everything you just said. I think the IAPP books, which are largely right behind me, are really valuable. I like to consume the information that way, even though books can sometimes be out of date on some of the stuff. And when I go into IAPP, I pretty much download every one of the free papers when I'm looking at a topic and I see, oh, there's 7 papers here. Maybe I'll read them, maybe I won't, but there's so much there. Do you need to go get a bunch of certifications? And mostly if you're trying to get a new job. The certifications mostly are a shortcut to tell a recruiter that you know something about privacy. They don't necessarily mean that, oh, you hold this certification and he doesn't, and therefore you're better at it. Not necessarily. I also don't think you need to go to the conference, again, kind of unless you're looking for a job. But the outside counsel point, I don't think can be understated. First of all, remember earlier I said you can get a little bit of free advice. But secondly, I was in the position at one point of replacing outside counsel. So I kind of knew exactly what our pain points were. And I knew, been at the company long enough to know, okay, here's what we need. And it could not have been clearer. We did a bunch of interviews and with outside counsel, outside lawyers that wanted the business. And, they put 7 people on the call because they go, look, this is our HIPAA person, and this is our this person, and this is our person that knows everybody on the hill, and blah, 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 blah. And they do the first call, okay, it's fine, that guy was good, and that guy was not as good, and that woman was great, and we'll see. You do the second call, same thing. You do the third call, and you go, oh my God, that's the person I've been looking for all along. You're going to get somebody at some point that speaks the language the way that you want to hear it, and that takes the time, by the way, to look up what your business does before that call. And takes the time to talk to you on the level of not just saying, well, section 1832.7 is the one that you got to look at. No, because I can't do anything with that with my executive team. I can't do anything with that with my engineering team. I can't do anything with that at all, other than to figure out how I'm going to translate. The best outside counsel, and it's not limited to privacy, are the ones that take a little bit of time to say, for your business, you got to worry about 3 things when it comes to CCPA. And obviously you need them to be right, but that's what I want to hear. So I think those are the good resources. I think that if you join a Tech GC or you join an ACC or something like that, you're also going to find the people that are going to be helpful, right? And connecting to the individual people is sometimes just as valuable as connecting to the trade group, right? I have seen, you get a lot of stuff. I'm sure you're on 7 different email distribution lists where people send an email and say, does anyone have a good form NDA or whatever? And hey, I've done the same thing. It's useful to do. But you will also get the people that are like, hey, I'm specifically looking at, last year it was, I'm specifically looking at the San Francisco public health order about COVID related to the California order about COVID and blah, blah, blah. And some person got on and said, look, I'm the employment lawyer in San Francisco doing this, and I'm willing to take a call if anybody wants to talk about it. I mean, for free. She doesn't even work for my company. She works for some other company, mercifully not a competitor. And that call, that 30 minutes was unbelievably valuable. Free call. Now I have that person as a LinkedIn connection. Obviously do that person a favor, whatever. But having those conversations at the one-on-one level is also very important. So I agree with Peter that IAPP, I agree with Peter that outside counsel, but it is also sometimes just about finding the other people that are going through the same thing that you're going through, commiserating for 7 to 10 minutes, and then having a substantive conversation for the other 25 minutes.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I think you both talk about outside counsel as a great resource. We also got a question in the chat about inside counsel, about hiring and what the budget is. And I imagine for both of you, when you look at your outside counsel budget, and especially if you're a global company and you're comparing that to could be an inside counsel, position, the FTE, full-time role. How do you balance that and walk through what does that budgeting look like in terms of making that kind of thought decision process between outside or inside counsel? Is it even a debate at all? And is there, of course, there's probably a hybrid approach, which is a pitch for Lawtrades. But why don't you give us some feedback about inside versus outside budgeting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. The short answer is that there's a time and place for both, right? And you should not go into the notion that you're going to hire an inside privacy lawyer and they are not cheap to say, oh, now I'm not going to have any need for outside counsel. That's not going to be the case. All right. But there will come a point where either you are so much on the cutting edge or so privacy is such a core component that you're going to need that role. And especially if you find yourself spending a lot on outside counsel and going, well, I'm really sick of having to explain the business to the outside lawyer every time before I get the answer. It's like, I'd like to have this knowledge in-house. I'd like to have the knowledge of how working with our specific marketing team is a little different and that we need to be able to apply that, right? The budgeting side you're not going to make your CFO very happy. Privacy lawyers are in demand. Privacy lawyers are providing something that not everyone can do. I would imagine that at least some people registered for this because they're like, I'm afraid of privacy, or privacy is the one thing that I'm just not comfortable with. Well, privacy lawyers also know that. And so when you say, I want to hire a privacy lawyer to take the privacy problem off my hands, that comes at a cost. So it's not going to be cheap. But the good privacy lawyer, just like the good any other in-house lawyer, is the lawyer that's going to come in, understand your business, and say, here's how we, with our risk appetite, our regulatory footprint, and what we're trying to accomplish, here's how we are going to solve this problem. And it's not exactly what any outside lawyer can tell you, because I've taken the time to understand their business. I've taken the time to understand our goals, our strategy going forward, maybe the skeletons that we have in the closet. And I can apply that, and I can go to all of those teams and talk to them and communicate with them in a way that they will understand, not just me parroting the privacy law. That to me, that's how you approach this. Peter's probably going to tell you that it's even harder than I just said. Well, I'm guessing based on his global footprint.
Yeah, I mean, our setting aside, my current practice, which is a little bit different. I think that when I was at a smaller company, we actually looked at privacy as a strategic differentiator. And there's a question in the comments from Chris about how to sell B2B if you don't have a SOC 2. And I think one of the ways to do that is to signal to your counterparty that you take data protection and security seriously by having an in-house privacy specialist or privacy officer, having a CISO or security officer of some kind that you can put forward in the deal space. And I think that's another driver of when do you hire these people. It's if you're losing deals to a competitor in the B2B space because of privacy or because of security, that in itself might be a reason to invest in that. In terms of some of the other points that Jordan raised about when do you hire and when do you don't hire, I think it really comes down to the cost. And to us and to me, I typically use a 2.5 multiplier. So if I'm looking at a salary for privacy attorneys in my jurisdiction or in my region, and I'm spending about 2.5 of their salary on outside counsel, I'll start to look for a regional privacy officer, regional specialist. when you're operating globally, you're going to hire outside counsel, as Jordan mentioned. You're never going to find someone who's licensed to give you legal advice in Uzbekistan. So you need to have relationships with outside lawyers and be able to consult with them, but you can manage their spend, I think, with good, competent in-house people. If you're, around 2.5, of a salary for a competent privacy lawyer. There's another question in the chat that I think is also related to this, which is whether or not you should hire a privacy manager if you only have limited headcount. And I think privacy managers are fantastic. They're also like unicorns. If you find one, please direct message me and I will compete with you to hire them. There are very few folks who are independently competent and have the level of experience who don't have JDs. We just don't have a lot of those people. You can train them and you can find a good project manager or a good paralegal or a good legal operations specialist, but finding someone who is going to be able to single-handedly run your privacy program for you, who's not a JD, maybe Jordan's experience has been different. I've never met that person.
Wow.
Yeah,
I saw that question. I thought it was a great question. And let me just say a couple of things. One of which is in my current position with the footprint that we have and everything, I would hire a privacy program manager. But that's because I am pretty comfortable being the privacy lawyer backstopping that person. And I don't have the Uzbekistan problem. I don't have the global problem. I have a pretty known universe of what my problems are. The second thing I will say is I know of one of those unicorns that doesn't work here, but I'm not going to tell you where they do work here because they're very happy where they are. But there is some degree of you find a really smart person that's a really good program manager and they can pick up privacy, but it is a heavy weight to pick up. They're not going to pick it up the same way that they picked up the last thing they program managed in like, oh, give me 2 days and I'm going to read the thing and then I'll have the sense. When you get lucky in that circumstance, they've got to be really good at everything. Okay, they understand your business really, really well. Maybe it's someone that's internal or program managing something else. And they're the kind of person that you could almost see them as a lawyer. They're the kind of person that's going to ask 3 questions instead of 1, right? They're going to do all those other things. And they're willing to listen to you when you say, I really think you should watch this 11-hour training on U.S. privacy law. And they go, okay, yeah, I'm willing to watch that. If it's not that curiosity, if it's not that like, yeah, I really, really, really give a crap about this stuff and here's why, don't bother. It's you're not going to get there.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. Is because I think that backstop that you provide is what's key. If you can create an environment for that curious person to learn, absolutely they'll thrive. But if you don't have that, that's more my point. Is if it's really one headcount for privacy, I think it's a real challenging hire.
Yeah, and then the role I wouldn't say is it's changing rapidly as we speak because historically that program manager was multidisciplinary over all operations and everything privacy. Now we're seeing more specialists that get in, again like data subject requests that just focus on all the data mapping and all the access and deletion and all that, and then they leave kind of more privacy product in the privacy impact assessments or data protection impact assessments. That could be a whole different discipline. So it's not just like you're hiring that unicorn. We're seeing the field evolve into this kind of specialization as well, which is, I think, really important. The other aspect of that is more on the flip side of that, which goes specifically to Europe, but also there are other countries, and even we're even hearing word from the States that are starting to think about this, about the data protection officer role. That might be unique and different from the chief privacy officer role. That might be unique and different from the privacy counsel role. How do you look at the role of the DPO, especially for Europe, and whether that person should be a CPO as well, or whether that should be global or just regional for Europe? In maybe your own companies, how you kind of approach this. Maybe Peter, since your company is global, how do you specifically look at this?
Yeah, so the DPO debate, which is largely being run out of Belgium at the moment, and a little bit out of Luxembourg, is really one about independence and the vindication of individual rights. And the key premise that I think European regulators are looking for is, will whoever is in that role be sufficiently removed from the business operations to help individuals vindicate their data rights? And I think using that yardstick, you can quickly determine whether you can rule out a CISO. I've often seen companies try to appoint CISOs as DPOs. But you also raise some really interesting ethical questions about whether a member of your legal team can serve as a DPO. And so for me, I think for a small kind of relatively lean legal team, I would recommend looking at an outside part-time DPO just to avoid that whole species of question. You're a much larger team and you've got resources and you've got a large legal team and you're looking to hire privacy people, then you can start to get into the conversation about whether you have an in-house DPO and whether that's appropriate. But smaller teams, leaner teams, I would definitely look for an outside appointee. It's just a hornet's nest of challenges at the moment.
Just to follow up on that really quickly, do you believe that DPO role needs to be in Europe, or if you're an American company, or can they also be an American DPO that helps support you, in Europe or other places as well?
So it's been a couple of days since I looked at this, and Ben, you know this, but European law can change pretty quickly. But I would say that it doesn't necessarily need to be in Europe. That's the safest bet, but you don't necessarily need to be in Europe. There are some rules around if you have a presence in Europe and whether you have a registered office and you need a representative in Europe. And we could spend an entire webinar on that. But I would say that, assuming that you're in the US and you're not established in the European Union, it would probably be safer to have a European DPO if you are selling into the European Union. If you are established in Europe and you want to have a US DPO, I think you're probably on safer ground. But that's just a general high-level analysis. But curious to hear what Jordan has to say about that, because I'm sure he's wrestled with those issues too.
No, hopefully everyone's already thinking what I'm thinking, which is just don't do business in Europe. That's how we'd solve this problem here.
But the produce is so good.
I mercifully have not had to deal with this problem in the last 2.5 years because we're not established in Europe. So my thoughts on this are pretty out of date.
Yeah, I think my historic advice on the DPO front is if you do have operations in Europe, if it is a time zone issue and you're going to be working with a local team there, then it's important to have obviously somebody on the ground there. But the other part of that is if you think you're actually going to have to do a prior consultation with a local data protection, office in a particular country, or you're going to have to interface with the data protection authorities in across Europe. Of course, you want to have someone that is in Europe and knows the lay of the land there. But for most U.S. companies that just have a lot of data from Europeans, but their headquarters, their operations, everything is in America. Then it is sufficient to have a U.S.-based entity be the DPO. There are even law firms that serve as DPOs as well. So I know we're getting towards the end, and I know I think we've hit many of the questions. Thank you, both panelists have answered a lot of the questions already. I think there's a couple of other kind of pieces of this that we didn't quite get on the community and forums thing. Somebody mentioned TechGC is one type forum or IPP is another forum, but what do you think about other forums or other resources that just to be kind of in the same room or same email list or other places where you can, or even followers? I think we did a question about that. Influencers in the privacy space you might be able to follow on LinkedIn. Maybe some more tactical thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I since I brought up LinkedIn, I think a great person to follow is Brian Levine at E&Y. He's a former prosecutor. We also work together, but he's great, and he often, and to his credit, posits really interesting judicial decisions or U.S. specific findings that are just terrific. So I would definitely follow Brian Levine if you can find him on LinkedIn. I also like Omar Tees at Goodwin. He's got some great content and always has an interesting perspective. I think that I'm blanking on his first name, Professor Solov.
Daniel.
The Future of Privacy. Yeah, Daniel. I keep thinking Jay because that's Trump's lawyer, but that's a different webinar. I think he's really good and has some great content. And then I would follow, and you can follow them, the European Data Protection Board. They're always publishing material. Also, the European Data Protection Officer, that office puts out a weekly email newsletter, which is really, really good and often can sort of point the way to which at least the European DPOs are thinking, and gives you a little bit of a headway on what the European Data Protection Board is interested in. So those are some great places to start. But great to hear what you both think about other influencers to follow.
Yeah, so I agree with those. I actually just opened up my LinkedIn and I see that I'm following hashtags, data and privacy. And I'm following a lot of the same people that he's talking about. I would put a plug in for Phil Lee, who I think is also in the EU, is a great resource. The other thing I'll say is that if you start following any of these people, and if you start following any of these conversations, you're going to really quickly be like, oh, wow, I didn't know who Daniel Solov was, but I've seen his post 3 times in the last 3 weeks because so-and-so is liking it, and this hashtag and blah, 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 blah. And you're going to kind of start to see the people that you want to see. And then, I mean, I've actually had it happen more than once where I'm doing that, and then I look back and I go, oh, that's why that guy's name's familiar. His name's literally on that book. And so, I think you will find those people. And if you really are building your knowledge from scratch, that's where those conferences and things like that do come in handy. That's where being a little bit more proactive comes in handy, because you only have to go to the IPP conference once to go, okay, I know who I like to listen to. I understand now what made sense to me. And I think so much of it is about, who can meet you where you are and what you want to consume. I haven't listened to it in a while. Is the IPP podcast still going, Peter? Do you know?
I used to listen to it, but I kind of dropped off the radar on that one.
It was pretty good. I know that the hostess left, and so left IPP, and so I don't know.
Yeah,
what's still going on. I haven't seen a lot. That's the only one I've ever seen that was worth listening to on podcast side. I know that's where a lot of people are trying to get their content these days.
I don't think either of you mentioned the Future of Privacy Forum. Maybe I missed it, but that's Jules Polonetsky and actually many of the leaders in the Future of Privacy Forum have their own kind of streams of content and webinars and things that they do, most of which are for free. There's also, coming back to the question around privacy tech, there's a group called the Rise of Privacy Tech. TROPT is a horrible acronym. But they're kind of a newish group that is now putting on a lot of content around kind of really some really interesting and privacy innovative one. I just actually signed up before this call they're doing a Web3 privacy session next week. So if you're on that kind of cutting edge, then that group is definitely interesting. And they also, again, bring in a lot of panelists, from those tech companies to kind of try to help you distinguish this privacy tech solution versus that one. And then, of course, there's all the law firms. I think that I'd be remiss not to kind of back up what everybody said, that those outside counsel, have privacy teams. All the big firms now have privacy teams. They put out a lot of content. They put out a lot of webinars. I spend a lot of time in the ad tech space. And some of the law firms like Field Fisher is one of the great kind of European ad tech entities that has been closely monitoring, and if you're also in ad tech, the IAB Tech Lab and IAB Europe, IAB US all do a ton of great privacy kind of innovation content around the advertising space, because that changes on a basically daily basis. I think the other question, that I just want to make sure we hit on before the end here, that came up in the chat is coming back to that question about regional and local specific issues. And let's just focus on the U.S. for now, because, we just saw the Utah privacy law get passed about a week ago. We've got Virginia, Colorado, and the new California Privacy Rights Act coming online in January. We've got, I don't remember how many states are in the final stages of passing their own privacy laws. How do you look at all of these state-specific changes? Are you looking at a local kind of, state-by-state approach? Or you, maybe Jordan, you probably have to in the nature of your business, but how do you kind of, do you benchmark California as the law of the land, or do you still look at this as a regional approach?
Well, we started with that because first, But you still have to read every single new one because, like I said, people are trying to do different things, of course. But the thing to know is that it's not just the states, right? You have your industry specific stuff. States that may or may not have a specific omnibus privacy law definitely have a breach notification law. And they conflict. I can think of at least a couple states that they literally conflict. What you put in one breach notice cannot be in another one. So there is no way to just say, hey, we're a California company and we're going to follow California law and don't worry about anything else. It's not how the internet works and it's not how these laws work. So we do try to grant the kind of quote best rights. We give a data subject right to everybody, even if they're not in a state that has gotten there yet. Because, like I said earlier on, it's just easier operationally. And the last thing I want is for my customer support rep to be in a 10 email back and forth about whether the person, because they were at the San Francisco airport, is entitled to this or not. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But with every new law, and you mentioned some of them, and then there's a whole other list that I've seen about, like, here are the ones that might pass or that people are thinking about. It's not always politically where you might think. Sometimes it is, but it's not always. You do have to keep an eye on it. And you do have to go, wait a minute. With my copy this morning, let me look at this one and let me see who put out a good one-pager. And that's where you have to go back to those law firms that you're following, because they're all going to put out the one-pagers very, very quickly to say, do you know what you need for the Minnesota law? And then you go, wait a minute, Minnesota, I forgot that was a state. And shade Minnesota, love Minnesota. And you do have to take the time to think it through every time. And that's, honestly, once you get to that level, that is where, boy, it would sure be nice to have a program manager. It sure would be nice to have a dedicated privacy lawyer or something like that, especially once you say, well, we're not just a U.S. company. And what's going on in Canada, and what's going on in the provinces in Canada, and what's going on in Europe, and what's going on and on and on. That monitoring piece, it's going to be there forever.
I think just to put in a plug on U.S. domestic law, I agree with what Jordan said. I would also just caution everyone listening that CPRA and Virginia Privacy Act are great, and these omnibus privacy acts are going to be very challenging to comply with. But there's a whole host of other privacy laws that are bubbling at the state level around children's privacy, around data transmissions that will be very problematic and are not getting a lot of attention in the privacy space. There's currently a law pending before the California legislature to adopt pretty much in toto the UK Children's Code into California law, which would dramatically escalate how companies can use images of all sorts and how they have to vet their user base. And so I tend to really, really focus in on the California legislature in addition to monitoring all of these other laws, because it's a hotbed of privacy legislation at the moment. So if you have a chance, spend some time looking at what California is up to.
That's a great final answer. Thank you both. This has been amazing. I'm going to hand it back to Matt from Lawtrades, and I think we'll have maybe a few minutes afterwards as an outro chat to keep going if we want.
Guys, there's too many people to add on social media. You gave me like a long list, and I'm not going to be able to come up with this. But I appreciate it because I'm a novice in privacy. This was awesome to hear from you guys. I will be following all those people. I will be following all of you guys as well. For everyone watching, thank you so much for joining. We have more events coming. We have how to build a high-performing legal team. That's with Bungalow and AltaSource. I'll also be there as well, moderating and giving at least my input when I was in that role. We're also launching our own community for legal pros. That is in the works. Stay tuned for everybody who's interested. And then finally, stay tuned also for this. We're going to be networking. There's going to be a networking button on the left of your screen when we're done here. Thanks again, Ben, Peter, Jordan. It's been a blast. And I hope to see everyone who's been here soon.